rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Oh, there it is. I'm getting that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll show that all board members are present. I'd like to ask for review of the agenda.
I have one quick note for the board's consideration on the agenda, and it is regarding item number 7, which is the transition of the payroll status and for board members and the CalPERS retirement benefits. And what has happened is literally late this afternoon, like within the past hour and a half, we had further communications from the CalPERS representative regarding our prior interpretation of the retirement benefit aspect of it. So to avoid any confusion tonight, because it's not a time-sensitive item, my suggestion is to continue that item or postpone it until we can get any confusion cleared up on this. So we received via phone call to staff essentially a correction. They said what we've been telling you on this particular item was a mistake, and here is our new interpretation. So I don't want to try and address that without 100% certainty on the information.
So just the facts.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
All right, everyone, so
That's fine with
we'll
me.
table item number 7, is that continue to the next meeting, Greg, or just
I think we should very readily be able to have this cleared in the next meeting.
Is it something that can be sent around electronically?
When we get the information, yeah.
Yeah, why don't we do that so we don't have to spend a lot of time?
Okay, very good.
Okay. All right, so we will continue item number 7 until next time. Any other comments on the agenda? Any public comment? Oh, yes?
No, I was just going to say, I'm
Oh,
going to put
okay. All right. Any public comments on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll ask for a
I
motion.
move to approve the agenda and continue item 7
Thank you. Ed
for additional information.
Ed Sullivan, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to item number 3, open time for the public to raise items not on the agenda or the future agenda. Any members of the public wish to raise items for future agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to item number 4, standing committees report out. We had finance and HR this month. So I'll ask for the finance committee members to report on finance first.
You received the finance committee agenda, right, in the packets?
For the board packets.
Yeah.
We did, yes.
Minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The notes and
And there should be minutes.
minutes, yes.
So, we went over what's on the agenda. I had a few questions on line items. I don't know if I'm going to go over them because they were cleared up. And on legal, we're going to project it for the year will be $512,000, the rate where we're at now. So we'll be over budgeted 150 approximately.
For the fiscal year ending?
Right, fiscal year ending. And that was line item 5.
What was the number again?
512, it's on your spreadsheet in your financial section.
That you got.
That's the projected at the end of the year, which I assume is the end of June.
Yes.
And we had budgeted for, I thought, $360.
That's correct, then.
Yeah. Where do those funds come from, those extra funds?
They come essentially out of our reserves. They're unplanned expenditures.
And what do we have in our reserves?
Well, at the moment, we're showing an end of fiscal year balance of approximately $13.3 million. As of this current year to date, let me that's actually on the very first page. We have currently a end of this recording period cash balance of about 13.7 million. So again, currently we're at about 13.7, and the projections for the end of fiscal year are about 13.3 million.
But the balance is different from the reserve.
Right.
Correct. That's a good point. The cash balance includes a mix of our 3 different reserve funds. So in there, this would appropriately be under the operations and maintenance reserve, since that is where the professional legal services come out of. So it would be, it basically would be coming out of our O&M reserve.
Shouldn't we do a board amendment when we're over budgeted on a item such as this?
That's a decision for the board, and when we've talked about it in the past, we have said we will report and track items, but we haven't gotten direction to actually do budget amendments.
There's no legal requirement that we amend the budget.
Not that I'm aware of, no. I mean, we are tracking it, and we are showing the forecasted difference, so the short answer is we have not planned on doing that. But we do have a good handle on why the projection is where it's going, and what the current, what's behind the current trend.
Is this still, pardon me, is this still a finance committee report out, or are we, would you?
Yeah, that's part of the
Okay.
Our
legal requirement.
report, I mean, yeah, in the back on B is, or is it C? B is a summary of legal. You can see how the money is flowing on particular items. So this is an accumulation. It's not showing month to month, but we have a month to month on the spreadsheet. But this one in the back tells you different things where it's going.
Yeah, so we did go through this. We had a spike. We've been trending to the lowest numbers we've probably had in the past several years. Last month's being under 24,000, and barring the recent activity related to the Public Record Act requests, we would be trending probably less than $20,000 this month. So we have had a spike, but we know exactly what it's related to, and it wasn't an item we could manage. It wasn't an optional item for the district. When we get hit with a VRE request, we have to respond. So I guess my point is we know exactly what is behind the jump in numbers, and they are trending at this point to the lowest monthly averages we've had, and again, as far as I know, the last 2 fiscal years.
To the public records request, is that in personal matters or general legal?
We have put those under general legal for the purposes of just in general tracking it.
Okay. And let's see, line number 6. I guess we're going to take that off the agenda, but we did have a discussion on line number 6 about CalPERS. And we never really came to a full conclusion on that.
Well, we didn't agree.
CalPERS, I'm sorry, regarding the board?
The one that just got pulled off.
Okay, okay,
So
right.
Yes.
We'll explicate that.
We agreed to disagree.
Yeah.
And then on the fraud reporting policy, I had sent an email to Greg to get a clarification if we can respond to that tonight.
Oh, and yes, and we do have,
But it's on the agenda, so.
yeah, so we will get to that.
And we did go off track a little bit and talk about rates, but we can wait until we get to the item. That's all I have to say.
No, that was a good summary.
The HRs, moving on to the HR subcommittee. The HR subcommittee met yesterday,
We did.
and we reviewed the report that's included in the board packet tonight, and then also the work plan, which will be presented to the board presumably next month for the services that RGS will be providing to us over the next year. Pat, did you want to say anything in more detail?
Well, we also have an administrative policy that we're looking at, and we saw some things that needed some markups, and I think Greg gave me an additional handout that showed the markup version of our admin policy and procedure, and the subject is reporting fraud. And so you can see that there's been some work done there, so that's for your review.
And as I understand, the Finance Committee reviewed that also.
Correct. And just as, when you get to that item, later in tonight's agenda, I should say, you've been given a red line update. It was a mistake on our part. We had accidentally inserted one earlier draft in what went out in the board package. So there's some very minor changes, and they're shown in your red line strikeout versions for when you get to that item.
The other thing I say about the HR subcommittee is that the work that RGS proposes to do for us over the next year is a lot, and it's all absolutely necessary in my opinion. And it seems like it's really well organized. I think it bodes very well for the internal management of the district staff going forward.
Yeah, they've done the rigor, and it's well planned and laid out, in my opinion, very well.
Okay, so moving on.
I'm sorry, I got a couple things I forgot to say. I asked the question on how much money was left for laterals, and it's $150,000. So we have 3 months left for this budget. So trying to get a look out there for folks in the community. There's quite a bit of money. I think last year, or the year before, we had ran out, so this is a good opportunity. Maybe we can send an email out to municipalities and let their mayors or managers know we've got this money left.
Good idea.
The other question that came up was how much solar, if we could actually solar. I was looking at our PG&E bill, and one bill was $9,000. And it's, Peter was saying that he talked about this in the past for a long time.
Yeah, it's been an item, but there are a number of constraints on a non-tax paying entity getting any tax benefits from putting up solar panels, so that was one of the obstacles. We haven't really pursued it extensively.
Do we have 200,000 outreach? Do we have some outreach money for something
Yes.
like this?
We have outreach monies that would not be something we'd utilize for like a renewable energy project. That would most likely, if there was a specific project, it would most likely come out of our capital budget. And I know it has come up a number of times, and we have the capacity this year to look at it. But if it's something we want to do a formal study on in the near future, we can. It's very well established. So,
Sometimes they'll do them for free, the festivals.
yes.
So is there a way we could get this on the agenda, just to consider it? If you're looking at $9,000 a month, over 12 months, it's a big
It's our, yeah.
chunk of
there's no
change
question.
that
Yeah.
we could be using to the ground.
If the board wants to give us direction on it, I don't know if it'd be appropriate this evening, if you want to make that an item for discussion at the next meeting or soon after, we can be happy to do that and bring back a proposed set of steps. I think we're getting to the point where we could actually address that more constructively right now, in terms of sort of internal capability, so.
I mean, my understanding, your comment is solar is difficult to do if you're not getting a tax break on it.
Right.
It is something you lay out a lot of money for, and then you get the benefits of over a long, long stretch of time. So
There are entities like Berkeley, though, that have agreements so that investors pay for the solar panels, and they get the tax benefit, but they then provide the energy as passed through cheaper than it would be if they were buying directly from PG&E.
so it's worth investigating.
Any direction?
Jason, did you guys look at that at one time?
We did a solar power feasibility study back in 2002 two.
Before the 30% Fed benefit kicked in.
At that time, there was a 50% rebate from the PG self-generation incentive program. It just didn't make, sense for our agency at that time. We didn't have a lot of land.
Even at 50%, right?
Well, for consideration for the next agenda, we own the building,
Sure.
so it would be a good effort for the environment and for us to save money for ratepayers.
We can bring back just like a sort of a, I guess it's called an action plan, or proposed set of steps to just get on it. And it does come up periodically, and we mostly have not addressed it just out of a relative prioritization, but it's something we probably can start to do. So we'll take that as generally direction to start working on bringing you something for our agenda, and expect it, I guess, within the next 1 to 2 board cycles, if that works. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Sure. And are you thinking just the current building, or?
Well, we talked about that a little bit, because we have, how many acres?
Well,
I know that would be a
maximum
problem.
installation on what,
I don't,
almost 10 acres?
yeah, but it is a sunny building at Kerner.
Yeah.
And if we could save money, I know you have to wait some years for it to pay back, but we just paid off the building.
Well, having just recently installed a solar system in my home, I can tell you, I think the investment would be negligible over 20 years. You're, 11 to 15 cents per kilowatt, opposed to other tier numbers that you get, depending on how much you use.
Yeah,
It
true.
might be
This 9,000 from the pump stations mostly.
What we would probably do is, that we would probably approach this in a way that just takes all of the district's significant buildings, pump station 15, pump station 13, 14, 12, and they would all be similar rooftop mount solars, and so they all have the same basic scale, and they would all be the same general type of projects. So my guess is at the moment, just off the cuff, we'd probably look at a feasibility effort that treated this as, can we do essentially facilities, rooftop solar around the district, and what would that look like? Something like that. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay.
So, is there any public comment on item number 4, things needed to put out? Seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 5, the consent calendar. Does any director have an item here she'd like to pull for discussion?
Just a couple questions. On the financials, the sewer service charges, that looks like down about 36,000 this year. I'm sorry, this month. And is that from less water use for the commercial? I think it probably is. Is that a result of a conservation program or less water being used by the commercial? It's on page 5 of 8, sewer charges. Due to
Yeah,
increased water
that's
usage.
been Frank, we've had that, that's sort of carried over note. Yeah, we've seen the same trend for most of this year. Yeah.
So we're probably going to end up 400,000?
No, I'm sorry, those, just to clarify, so that footnote is referring to the year-to-date table.
Oh, just year-to-date, we're down 36,000, not this month.
That's my understanding, is that, am I interpreting that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, so you're looking at a year-to-date, so as we get to the end of this fiscal year, usually we're able to project sewer service charges with a fairly high degree of accuracy because they are fixed.
That's not a 1 month figure.
No,
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks. Another question, on the big spreadsheet, it's estimated about $15,279,000 at the end of June, end of the fiscal year as a balance, down the bottom right hand of the last column. Does that include any bond money, or is that just our our other funds?
The bond proceeds, to the extent that they remain unspent, they would be reflected in that
In that number?
balance.
Okay,
correct,
okay.
yeah.
Is that the 7 million?
No,
Bond rate?
yeah, it's reflected in, it's part of the 13.2.
Uh-huh.
Just the unspent funds are sitting in our account, they would be part of that amount.
Any other questions on the consent calendar items? Okay, then I'll ask for a motion to move the consent calendar.
I can move the consent calendar.
Second?
Wasco, Baker, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Moving on to item number 6, consideration of approval to direct the general manager to give notice of the public hearing as required for property hearing. Right?
Okay, I will go through some just brief introductory items on this. And the first thing I just want to point out is a quick logistical item. You each just received a hard copy of the draft, and the reason why is we made 2 very minor changes to that as compared to what you have in your draft. And they're shown in the blue print, and I just want to point them out so you are clear on them. These were just oversights in the draft that went into the package. There's a reference to the updated standard flow value, the 215 gallons per day on the bottom of page 2. And that topic is well covered in the previous information and it's an important item, and we intended to have it in there, we did not, so it's just been corrected. And the second change is on the very last page. We looked again at the proposed schedule and realized it probably made more sense to modify that so that if the board goes forward with this action, that the hearing date would land on the same date as the regular May board meeting. And that extends, the period a bit. If it goes forward as scheduled. But we just changed that from the 15th to the 21st, really just to hopefully make it more convenient as far as scheduling. So it's a several-day extension in the date, and that's all. So I just want to point those out. That's what you have in front of you. Okay, so what this item is, it's consideration of initiating what's generically sort of referred to as the Prop 218 process, which is required by state law for the utility rate updates of the nature that the district is considering. You have a pretty brief staff report in front of you, and you also have the draft notice that would be sent out to all of the parcel owners within the district service area. And that we'll go through that in a moment. So very briefly for background, the district is now, tonight when you're considering starting the 218 process, it is rightfully, there's a tendency to go right to the numbers for good reason. They're very important. But I think it's important, and I'm going to just reiterate the context for this. The district has basically been on about a roughly 12 to 18 month process of getting back to some reasonable fiscal soundness or help from the mid-2012 period when we essentially almost ran out of operating cash. We went through a number of steps to get to where we are today. We were able to secure the emergency loan from the county. We were able to negotiate some very favorable and flexible terms in terms of the cease and desist order with the state to get the support for the much more flexible and hopefully efficient approach in the capital program that's in the IMP. Then we adopted a new fiscal year budget, the 13-14 budget, which reflected all of these actions. We took the steps of doing the near-term debt restructuring. We then completed the IMP, which gave us an updated 5-year capital program, substantially more efficient and lower cost than the prior ones. Based on the IMP, we were able to develop a 5-year financial forecast, which was issued back in October of 2013 and was gone through at that time. On the basis of the information, the financial information in the 5-year forecast, we then went forward with the rate study, which is built on all of this prior information. So the rate study has been completed. We went through that in the last couple of meetings. We've had a series of different discussions on that. And so the Prop 218 process is basically the next step in that process. So I just want to kind of give that some context. The basics of the update that are reflected in the study, or recommended from the study, are, first of all, they start with some, hopefully these are improvements, changes to the rate structure, where we're going from the strictly flat rate to what we're calling the differential flat rate, to improve the rate equity between single-family and multifamily residential. We're doing a rebalancing of the equivalent dwelling unit count, as we explained, and that has to do with the update in the standard flow number from 250 to 215. And the other significant change in terms of the rate structure for non-residential is we're ending the practice, or we will be ending the practice of rounding to the whole equivalent dwelling unit, and we'll be utilizing tenths of an equivalent dwelling unit for commercial non-residential customers, which makes their rates in the future hopefully much closer and more reflective to their actual use on the system. There are minimal to, in fact, basically no changes to our basic billing and administrative process other than incorporating these changes should we go forward. So again, let's look briefly at the 218 notice. It has a lot of fairly standard content. I won't go through that in detail. It's meant obviously to explain to the ratepayers that this is occurring, that there is a protest period, how their protest should be submitted, what the timelines are, and what the general process will be for considering the protests and going forward with next steps and decisions. I already mentioned the change in the date. So we are, if this were to go forward, we'd be looking at a protest hearing that would align with the regular board meeting in May. So that's what will be initiated this evening if it is approved by the board. We will simply go to the printer, we will make these up and send them out next week. The logistics are pretty straightforward. So then the last item I really want to touch on is to address the concerns that have been rightfully expressed with with the magnitude of the rate changes that are being proposed. These are a series on, I'm going to speak in averages because that seems to be the most appropriate, but even for your average single-family residential, you're looking at a series of annual 7 to 8% rate adjustments for each of the next 5 years. Those add up. There's no getting around the numbers. So it is a significant change. It's a significant increase on the customers. We recognize that. What I want to stress is that the 218 process you're doing tonight will set in place the process for the maximum adjustments that can be made, and if you have basis for adopting a refined rate schedule that is slightly lower between now and the protest hearing in May, you can always do that. And then subsequently, if the district does adopt the new rates under 218, they will be the maximums going forward, and you will have the opportunity to revisit these each fiscal year and do that in a manner that ties into that year's budgeting process and to the rolling 5-year financial forecast, and also reflecting all of the latest information on the capital program. So my point is that you're sort of setting the only thing you're committing to here is a structure change and a maximum cap you can't exceed. As we get better information, if there is any opportunity, the idea here is to not leave this on autopilot, but make sure that it's revisited every single fiscal year. And only the changes that are still justified are actually what's implemented. That's not meant to say that they're not likely to still be what's proposed, because that is the best information we have today. My point is, this will be not left on autopilot. You'll have an opportunity each fiscal year to revisit these. And there have been districts locally, just within the past 1 to 2 fiscal years, that doing that same process have said, oh, we have a basis for adopting a lower adjustment to the rates and so forth. So that's the point I'm trying to make. The rates we have, they reflect our best efforts at the financial facts, the regulatory facts, the projections that we've developed on the financial side. And I would just urge you to treat this as a package, and if you're looking at changes down the road, again, treat it as a package. It's very difficult to pick parts of this apart and not undermine sort of the soundness of the whole financial plan. So those are things that we can look at going down the road, but tonight all you're doing under this agenda item is considering the initiation of the Prop 218 protest period. And with that, I will stop and hand it back to the board.
Thank you. We said it last month, but I think it bears repeating that we are required to do this by the State Regional Water Quality Board. We committed to doing it, and that if we weren't to go forward with increasing the capacity of this district to fix the pipes and do the capital work that we've told them we're going to do, we'll be fined for that. And including on the timeline of this, we are moving forward quite quickly, and that is because that is what we have to do to meet legal requirements of the state. Other questions from board members? Pam?
You want to start comments now? I don't have any questions, raise it. I'll have some comments.
Okay, questions or comments?
What are we doing now? Taking it to the public, or we're just gonna?
Oh, okay, I thought we took things initially from the board. and
Well,
then
no,
we'll
initial
get back.
questions. I mean, I just worked up the numbers. I just have comments.
Okay, you want me to go to the public?
Well, I see what the board, other board members have questions.
We're waiting to hear what you have to say, Rick.
No, don't work at public, I have this, I just worked the numbers, I'm just kidding.
All right, nothing from the board initially, I'll take it out to the public. Is there any public?
Okay, this is confusing. Are you closing it off to the board and then letting the public speak and bringing it back to the board?
Yes.
Okay, then I have some comments. So we're going to do it opposite.
No? Okay, in my mind, questions and comments can go at any time, but.
Okay, so Greg, I just want to be clear on you made your comment. This, what we did, the PowerPoint, page 9, the annual bill impact analysis. Is this correct? What you're referring to?
Yeah, those are the results of the
Okay,
analysis.
so the first year is 9.6% increase, and then the next 3 years it's 8.4 and 8.3, and the last year it's 7%. Is that what you mean?
Yes, those are the numbers, Dan.
Okay, so I guess I just wanted to be clear to the public when you say 7 to 8%. It's more like 8 or beyond 8,
Yeah,
so.
sure.
And I asked the last meeting, and I asked if you could bring back some variances or other alternative calculations so we could look at 6 or 7%, and I don't see that in tonight's package.
Correct. Well,
And
I
I'm
know that
curious as to why.
we are working on your response, or your request, I should say. And I was under the, the short answer is we are working on that, and we don't have an answer for it tonight. These are the numbers based on the best projection we have right now. That's what I was emphasizing on my earlier comments, is that let me just back up a second for the full board's understanding, because I'm not clear whether that was, to the extent it was communicated in the board meeting, you also reiterated afterwards that would be a desirable outcome. So we're working on it. Rick and Wendy and I are going back to see what we can do, but as I explained to you earlier, we don't have an answer for this evening. So we will be
Okay,
bringing
but I
back.
think for due diligence for the community, there should be other alternatives that show here. To have us have some kind of voice and discussion before the Prop 218 notice goes out. To me, that's more transparent.
Sure.
It's more of a variance to see,
Sure.
rather than this is the way it needs to be. Because going back to the CEO,
Mhm.
Part 2, which we've had a discussion about, which I actually asked to bring to a copy.
Which I have, by the way, if you'd like them, I have
The
3 copies.
CDO talks, and I'm all in for the 5-year plan and the IAMP.
Mhm.
However, there's no set figure on how much we need to repair in the ground. And after talking to Rick today, and there's going to be an $18 million reserve at the end of 5 years. And I'm questioning, why do we have such a large reserve? And why don't we have
Yeah.
a couple of other places to look at how these rates are going to be adjusted?
Okay.
And we had at the finance committee, we did say, or you said, and that it was conservative and aggressive.
Correct.
And I'm concerned about shocking the ratepayers
Sure.
and looking at the demographics of the community. You know?
Right, right. Let me try to address each of those if I can. So, first of all, yes, I mean, relative to our historic patterns, the capital spending, which is driving a very large, 90% plus of the rate change requirements, that will be a level of activity that's sustained that will be above our long-term average. So there's a number of sources of uncertainty when you look 5 years out in our capital program, and that's why I keep emphasizing this has to be revisited every fiscal cycle as we get more information. You mentioned the reserves. The value of those reserves, the approximately 18 million, that is the number that results from the financial reserves policies that the board adopted earlier this year. And they are tied to our average O&M spending, and they're tied to our capital spending. So your reserve target is a policy decision. And that's a good example I was getting at a moment ago when, again, in response to your request, those are some of the things we're trying to look at very quickly, but we do not have numbers for this evening. When I say bring this, keep this as a package, don't start to break it up, that's a good example. If the board makes a conscious decision, so to speak, to say, these reserve policies that we adopted last year seem excessive or seem like a luxury we can't afford, and therefore we're going to only achieve 50% of the target instead of 100% over the next 5 years, because you won't get there right away. It takes us 5 years to hit those targets. That's a policy decision that you can make, and then we can reflect it in the financial projections. But what I want to resist is picking those a piece or one at a time. So that's a great example, and that's the kind of numbers that we're going to be looking at. The initial results, of just the work we've been trying to do shows that even substantial changes in some of these items are going to result in what I would call, fairly modest changes to the projected rate adjustments. You're not looking at, wholesale changes. So I don't want to go into numbers this evening because that is a slippery slope, but I can tell you that what we are going to do is we're looking at those options, and we'll bring you back a comprehensive set to say, can we get half a point, can we get a point off of these rates? I don't have that for you this evening. So if the board, what I'm taking is sort of our next step is we are already working on that. So we don't have information this evening. So what you have tonight reflects all the best information that we have. So.
I'm curious, though, on what is the policy for the reserve? What does it say? Does it say we have to have a certain percentage?
Yeah, generally, it's tied to, we have 3 reserves established by policy. We have an emergency reserve,
It's a million.
we have an operations and maintenance reserve, which is typically about, I think it's about 6 months of our annual operations and maintenance spending. And it has to do, as you know, with the cash flow pattern that we experience because of our annual billing, and also the large semi-annual payments that we make to CMSA. So our cash flow picture is largely what's driving that requirement. The third one is the capital, and that's the largest one, and it's basically tied to a percentage of the forecasted next year's capital spending. And so it does tend to be a large number because of the large numbers. I don't want to revisit the whole policy question, but I do want to emphasize, we vetted those policies earlier as an organization and we adopted them. They can be changed at the board's discretion.
Hey Pam, can I ask a question? Peter was pointing out, he was lucky enough to see what the PowerPoint was from last
This one?
presentation had, and I don't know if you have it in front of you, but page 8 shows,
Which page?
page 8 of the PowerPoint, if you have it here?
This
The
one?
report.
Yeah,
No, the report.
That's the report.
That's the report.
the PowerPoint.
The report, that's the
That's the
report.
report.
No, that's the,
Oh, this is the report, I'm sorry.
you mean this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so on page 8, you go to figure 3.2, capital project. You can look at the total projected cost for capital work,
Mm-hmm.
and it's projected out over 5 years. So you go anywhere from 10 million up to 13.9 if you go across the bottom line. And if you look at the next page, 2 pages over, page 10, you can look at the trending that they did with the points and lines, and it shows you that, yes, we had targeted balances that came down. The top line, I think it's blue or
Oh,
navy
yeah, you're
blue.
colorblind, right?
It trends down to about 18 million, okay? And then you can see your minimum balances coming up to meet that. When you take that, that can also represent revenue.
Yeah, I get it.
So if you look at the end number in 2018, let's say, in 19, you can see that you've planned 13 million of that for capital projects. So your balances and your reserves are substantially less after the capital projects have been funded and completed. So maybe that helps clarify the projected $18
Yeah, it's
million
just-
reserves.
What's our highest reserves been in the last 3 years a year? You know?
10 million?
Well, first of all,
In the last-
keep in mind, we have not had formal policy targets. We have had just default
Right,
cash
that's why I'm
balances.
questioning
Right.
this extensively. Because
Right.
it's not clear to me what is really needed to be in reserve. And 18 million is more than even 1 year you could put in the ground. So I'm wondering, why are we raising the rates so high, 8%? And just to add to this, I've talked to other electeds in other sanitary districts and other community leaders, and they're feeling the same way. So I just want to put it out, all out on the table. And for the record, you know, I want to protect the ratepayers from too high rates, and then having a big pot of gold sitting there, and then going, why are we raising the rates so high? What's this 18 million? And talking to Rick, it's saying on here that we need a 10 million minimum balance for our reserves, is what you've read.
When we use the term minimum, that is like, that's living on the edge for us.
That's when you go down to 0 in
Yeah,
December.
that's when the surprise hits and we have no room to maneuver. That's why it's called minimum. We do not, let me be crystal clear. When we adopted those reserve policies, we did it to secure financial resiliency, cash flow management, and basically the ability to not get knocked off track by the slightest little change in plan. So that red line minimum should be like,
Don't cross me.
yeah, don't go there. It's where we've been in the past, and it's why when we get hit with crosswinds, we do not have what you would call, what I'd call financial resiliency. We're not able to sustain any changes without it becoming a crisis. So Now, if you, to follow, sorry, since Pat's referenced this, it's a very good example. If you go to page 10 of the report and you look at the graph, that I think tells a more holistic picture here. The green line, that is the target reserves, as you can see, it takes us 5 years of steady effort to get to that target. It is a conservative target. You could call it a couple different ways, but it is not a arbitrary target. It is a very specific target that we selected based on the cash flow considerations and so forth. So that graph, that green line, is a good example where if the board were to, and I'll just use this as an example, say, okay, well, for these reasons, we're going to acknowledge and think that we can manage with something lower than that. That's your discretion, and that would provide you some fairly modest relief, most likely, on what the rates look like. I'm just going to be stressing that you want to do that, recognizing what the trade-offs are, not in isolation. So that's all.
Well, but what bothers me is that I don't have anything to compare here, like a 1% decrease on how the reserves would look, how the rate, I think it's $7 an EDU,
Right.
is what I understand would be less. $7 an EDU per percent.
From for a
Reduction.
Okay, so in other words, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but okay, so
Yeah.
that sounds like a fairly modest number to me out of it.
And so I guess I'm going for more of a modest raise rather than a very high raise, because my sense is, and I know you keep saying, well, we can pull it back, but that is based on political will. And I don't know where the board's going after June.
Right.
So we can talk about it, we can vote on it and go forward, but after June, that whole direction may change.
Sure.
Well, I can guarantee that the direction of the State Water Resources Control Board and the capital requirements for the next 5 years aren't going to go away. So even though I won't be on this board after June, I would be remiss in my duties, I think, if I didn't try to explain this a little bit deeper, that the numbers are embedded into capital projects. So at the end of your fiscal cycle in 18-19, you're going to end up with not $18 million in the kitty. You're going to end up with closer to $7 million or perhaps even less. As far as catastrophic events that could still occur in this sanitary district or any other sanitary district where people are espousing that there's no reason to have a reserve of $7 million at the end of a fiscal year, that's, in my opinion, a very modest amount of money to have left over after that fiscal period, and that's after you've accomplished all the capital work that has been ordered through your consent decree. So I can understand your concern about raising rates. I'm going to have to pay them. I'm lucky I'm still working, but whittling it back, I think on a year-to-year basis, if you as a board, you're going to be able to vet that out, and I think that is built into this particular proposal. Where, let's just say you see that you have a position where you can pull back, and I think that language gives you quite a bit of latitude, actually, as a board.
Is Pat correct that the 18 million is actually not accounting for money that will be used in capital, or is it true reserve?
That's our total reserve.
Yeah.
So in June, you have 18 million. December, before your first tax bill comes in, you have 11 million less. So you have 7 million. If you have a blown pipe on Magnolia that collapses and you have to sink 3 or 4 million of that, that's it. That's your reserve. So I've heard two numbers. I've heard pot of gold and I've heard best practices. And what I heard from the financial consultants was this was best practice. So I'd really like to get some advice from them on why the curve goes that way. I know John was quite clear that it was best practice to have this kind of a reserve. And you look at the curve, it goes up from 10 million, which would put us at 0 each year, like what Frank
Based on
had to
cash
do.
flow.
Yeah, based on cash flow, up to 15 million at year 4, and then 18 million at year 5. And you don't know what's going to happen 4 years out in a sanitary district like this, where we think we're going to spend almost $100 million. So tell me what the difference is between pot of gold and best practice.
There's not anything to compare except this one number.
Well, I want to emphasize, these aren't.
I mean,
These are
I just
not
don't feel this is transparent, I'm sorry.
Well, every piece of information that is reflected in what you have in front of you tonight has been discussed and has been presented. So I don't know what more to do as far as transparency, but if the board has policy decisions, directions you want to look at, we can take direction on that, and we can run the numbers. And my point is, as earlier, is that if you have a cap, and we come back with some lower numbers, I don't want to promise anything because this is a hypotheticals, you will not be constrained by what was posted. So let me give you a quick, you focus on the reserves for good reason. The reserves are helping us manage uncertainty, and we've got a lot of uncertainty in front of us. We have three sources, at least, that I can identify. One is the scope of the capital projects. I'll give you a good example. Right now, we have a large diameter condition assessment underway. That's 9 miles of our largest, deepest gravity pipe that has never been looked at. We are looking at it for the first time ever right now. We'll have the results of that study in about the end of this calendar year. I don't know what it's going to say. It could say everything's great. It could say there's severe problems here and there. The point is, it's a source of uncertainty. We have bonds reflected in this. We have as good an ability as anyone to project the bond market, which means we don't. So even a 1 or 2% change in bond rates between now and the next 6 months, or 8 months, 12 months, could affect hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in debt financing. We have labor negotiations coming up in 2015 that will most likely have a significant impact on our staffing and operations and maintenance costs. We do not know the results of those negotiations yet. And lastly, just as another example, we are just sort of getting our head above water to where we could consider revisiting a long-term process to do something with our Larkspur Landing property. If you're looking out 5 years, I don't know what that looks like. It's another source of uncertainty. Some of these have upside, some of these have downside, and what the reserves are doing is giving you the ability to navigate those as you get resolution and clarity on them. So they play a very important role. And I guess, these are the numbers that we have tonight.
And just to add, it's a 3-2 vote possibly to pass this tonight. But for the rate increase, it'll have to be a 4/5.
That's my understanding. For
Correct.
for the
That's how it
secretary.
works.
Right. And if one board member's not here, how does that work?
In which consideration?
4/5.
I will defer to,
It would be 4/5 of the entire body.
So you have to revisit the vote.
No, it would be 4 out of the 4.
Oh, the whole 4.
It's 4 out of 5, and if one person decides not to show up, you would need 4, so you would need 4 of the 4.
Oh, I see.
Doesn't reach two thirds of a quorum?
No, it's 4, I would check the code
Check
again, but
again, please.
it's of the legislative body, because I've already been concerned about that. And an abstention, or let's say someone doesn't show up, we could always continue the matter for the next person that person to return, I guess.
So let me announce here, I have not missed a meeting since being appointed as the superintendent.
Oh, no.
Unfortunately, I will be gone the month of May, most of the month of May. Renita had mammograms last week, and she's free of cancer, so we're getting out of the country to celebrate, and I won't be back until 28th or 29th of May. I hate to have to bring that news to you, but
You'll leave your proxy, Frank?
Frank, I have you for your life.
Yes.
So, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and go back to where my family came from. And, but let me just say a few words. Pam's been talking a lot, I've had So, you know, at the last meeting, I looked at the numbers, and I was concerned about the rate increase, how much it was going to be, and how our residents were going to respond to it. The last time we did this, they turned out by the hundreds. I don't know what's going to happen this time. I think if they get this notice, they're going to turn out. We may have to rent a bigger hall or something. So when you figure the 5 years, it's going to be a 49% increase for single-family homes in the Ross Valley. 41% increase for single-family homes in Larkspur. It's a cumulative increase that compounds itself. We're going from 638 to 954. That's a $316 increase over 5 years. So what I'd like to do is look at a way to minimize the increase and still meet the needs, demands of the Regional Water Quality Control Board. You know, we're not required by them to approve these numbers. We're required by them to fix the pipes, replace the ones that are broken. So is there a way we can do it for less money? Or if we sell bonds, can we spread them out instead of 20 or 30 years to 40 years? I don't know. In looking at, we talked about it last week, expenditures. So the biggest single increase we're going to have in the next 5 years is central Marin sanitation agency. When I look at these numbers, and that's a $900,000 increase over what we're paying this year, from $6,543,000 to $7,443,000. Now these numbers came from them, right? Is that how we came up with CMSA numbers? Have they given us those?
Yeah, we get projections, correct. And
we're not projecting what they're going to release. They gave us these numbers.
When did you want to
Yes, they're taken directly from their 10-year forecast from their last published and approved budget.
Okay. So that's $900,000 increase over 5 years. Ross Valley Sanitary District, our salaries and benefits, they're going to go about $700,000. Now is that a educated guess, or is that a real number that we expect it to go to?
That's based pretty much on two things, Frank. It's the already determined remaining salary.
1 year,
yeah,
one more
and the
contract.
remaining parts of the current labor agreement, and then the other major component, because beyond that we didn't assume anything. So there are no increases beyond that because we had nothing to base them on. There are remaining increases in the healthcare and related, or generally in benefits costs, and those are a forecast. And the biggest one there is related to the healthcare benefits. And I think we picked an average annual inflation. Do you recall offhand, Wendy?
We looked at the last couple of years. This last year, I believe it was an 11% increase. So the forecast backed off of that a little bit and looked at some of the prior years, which were trending anywhere from 5 to 8%.
Now, is that PERS? Are we getting these numbers from PERS?
Well, we're basically taking the last several years and averaging them and just sort of doing the projection off of those.
Then we come down to Ross Valley Sanitary District operations and maintenance. Now that's down $500,000. So I'm just adding.
Yeah.
So up $900,000, up $700,000, down $500,000.
Yeah.
And then we look at the capital fund transfer, and that's up $400,000. So, question: do we really need to raise the rates that much? So I'm not convinced that we need to raise them. Now, I'm speaking a lot tonight because I'm not going to be here in May when we meet to talk about this. I'm just trying to get a sense about, how I'm looking at it, how I'm
Conference call.
kind of patching. Well, yeah, it's 9 hours difference, so we'll do it. At 7 o'clock, it'll be, what time will it be there? 4 in the morning.
You're up at that time.
I can get up at 4 in the morning. So I'm just not convinced that you have to raise the rates that much. I've been pouring through these numbers, looking for a way to not have to raise 49% over 5 years. So, I looked some numbers, with 29% over 5 years worth, a little under 6%, I don't know. I tried to see what a 29% raise is going to give us in revenue, and how much can we sell in bonds. I'm not sure that we can put $64 million in the ground in 5 years. That's about $12 million a year. I'm not sure we can physically do that. Another issue is our current staffing level. Last year I was talking about trying to freeze some of the vacancies. We have about 7 vacancies. I thought if those positions, we didn't fill them, that would have provided maybe another $1 million for fixing that. I'm just looking at anywhere there's a possibility of finding some funds to do the work without such a significant increase. And I'm wondering, I'm not sure how much of the work that needs to be done is going to be done by our in-house crews. We have a large staff, and can they pick up? Can they be doing some of this work that we think we're going to have to bond for?
Yeah. Those are. Every one of those items, Frank, they're all good examples. I know I sound like a broken record here. These are our current projections. We know that these numbers could change. And in several cases, there is a reasonable possibility that they could be lower than what we were showing. What I would suggest is if we can identify what some of those major areas of uncertainty are, and set up some clear, triggers or check-in points that say, if this is the outcome, if we're going into the next fiscal cycle, we're looking at our most up-to-date information on the capital, and for example, it's clear that we're averaging, just making up a number, 12 million instead of 14 million in the last couple of years. And there is not the need for, instead of a $30 million bond, it's a $25 million bond. I would recommend, my recommendation is going to be, as I've stated, that you start with those numbers that are produced based on the current best information we have, and then make sure you put in place steps or policies that don't let this stay on autopilot. So if we do find a way to do, for example, this is a perfect example. The last year, particularly the last 6 to 8 months, has shown us that we can likely achieve the 4 mile per year minimum regulatory target for the gravity sewer rehab replacement, probably at slightly, notably lower numbers than our earlier forecasts in terms of dollars per mile. And the reason why is we're finding that there's, and you'll see more of this in the later item when we talk about this upcoming construction contract or design contract, that if we come in and with our crews and we do some selective point repairs, which we're getting very efficient at, crews are getting very, very competent and very productive at them, we can reduce the need for the major capital improvement that the contractor has to do when they come into that same area. It's not a perfect solution, but if you're working with limited resources and you're trying to meet the regulatory constraints and get the system stabilized in there, it does meet those objectives. So again, we have so much change going on right now. The best I can tell you is we stay focused on getting the most up-to-date, best information and making changes every year to this as we have a solid basis for doing that. Anyway, I've said most of that already.
Yes, sure. And just one last thing, we're going through some litigation with San Quentin, the state of California, San Quentin, over the loss of San Quentin to CMSA. Should the courts rule in our favor, that's going to change our billing, our costs, our revenue. It'll increase some EDU treatment payments to CMSA. So I'm not sure how much would be offset if the courts rule in favor of lost value. But it could be a fairly significant figure. That's going to change our revenue stream also. So, you know.
And you know, if you have, I wish I could give you more examples and more specifics this evening, and we just have not had the opportunity to put those together yet. If we can identify these sources of variability, and then we can find reasonable, again, what I would sort of describe as trigger points or criteria, quantified real quantifiable criteria that says, when we get to this point and this information gives us these conclusions, this is the action generally that we're committing to from a policy perspective. So whether it's, hey, we get a cash infusion from Larkspur Landing 4 years from now, or 2 years from now, whatever. The policy commitment is X% of that money goes at a minimum towards, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, rate relief. If again, there's a number of examples that we go into, but that would be some actions that would help not let this just automatically happen, which is a very important concern. It does happen at other districts. There are other districts who have shown the benefits of actively managing this process for each of the fiscal years, and I think they kind of show the potential. But I don't want to put a feel-good spin on this. That these are the numbers. There is some potential. We can bring them down as we get refinements on these things. And I guess what I want to be specific on is we can try to bring you back here in the near future, an outline of what those might look like, and that you would have flexibility between now and the end of this whole process to say, okay, well, if that looks good, let's adjust these by this amount, and we can try to bring that back to you. But it would be, you're not restricting us from doing that this evening if this goes forward.
From a legal standpoint, what's the other side of the coin? If we do what Frank suggested and pick a lower number, and it turns out that we actually do have to spend more money, that we can't sell the land, that we have to pay more money for something, we have some disaster, we have the water board comes there and says you're not doing enough. And we sent something for 5 years. Can we go through another 218 process? Okay, so that gives us a lot more flexibility. The new board can do that.
Correct.
That's good.
On the other hand, given the timing, we have to provide by June the Regional Water Quality Board with information as to how we're going to bring this money. So, I would say these are the best numbers we have based on the experts we've engaged to provide us with numbers. And if they are something that we can back off of because we have an influx of money, we can do that. I think it would actually be irresponsible to plan based on an undetermined cash inflow that we, a speculative cash inflow. We've been for months receiving information about this package, so to suddenly turn and ask for something else, I think, and it doesn't make sense to me.
So from my standpoint, I'm not going to be on the board. So I won't be here to decide what goes on. I will say that the one time that I was on the board where we had a 5-year plan, it was a lot easier to schedule and budget and things like we knew what was going to be going on. Because I live in Larkspur, I have even more pain from the rate increase. And so it's not in my best interest to raise rates for the people in Larkspur because it costs me a lot more money. On the other hand, I think the evidence that we have gone through for the last year is so clear in our need to raise this money to to do the work that the water board has told us that we absolutely have to do. And I can see that lowering a percentage or two, or even, lowering a percentage or two out a year or two after the bonds have been funded, and we see whether or not there's some variability in our costs, that makes sense. But if you don't create the umbrella that allows you to do that, then you can end up in a very, very uncomfortable situation where you're behind the eight ball, you're shorter money, and you have the water board breathing down your neck.
Is that, shall I go out to the public, or?
We've talked about the land. Last time the board, the agency sold bonds, they took a loan out. Took a loan out to fix pipes. And that's the loan that was repaid back when the bonds were sold. They were going to pay that loan back by selling off the land, Larksville Landing. That was the plan at that time. But we still have that land, the Larksville Landing is going to be sold eventually. We may have to clean it. We may have to get that old sewer treatment plant out of the ground and sell it off to a sanitary landfill someplace. That was a bad decision that was made, but we may have to clean it. But it could be worth a large amount of money. A large amount of money. That could go into fixing pipes that was originally intended, I don't know, before I came. So there's so many facets of this that to look at. See what folks are voting.
And actually, I hope, just for everyone's, to be crystal clear, these projections reflect zero money from the Larksville property. We're all aware of that. Okay.
Can't predict what.
All right, I'll take it out to the public. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this item?
They're calling Fairfax. And there are concerns about the 218 project. The proposed change to the rate structure, differential account rate, is a good step. But today a news release went out about many of the concerns. A few of them that will be brought up about a rate increase. 3 real estate scandals during the past 6 years of the Ross Valley Sanitary District have squandered around $25 million of ratepayers' taxes and fees, and earned the district's reputation as one of the worst managed sewage districts in the state. 3 Marin civil grand jury reports have tried to steer the district in the right direction, but have largely been ignored. Legal fees the past 6 years have typically been more than 10 times what similar districts spend, and the district has lost or been forced to settle practically every legal entanglement it has generated, with legal fees and settlements topping $10 million. As one of the largest polluters in the county, by refusing to clean up contaminants at its former sewage treatment plant in Larkspur, a site now included in the draft Larkspur Spark Station Area Plan, RVSD was in breach of contract in a deal to sell the site, which not only cost the district a loss of about $12 million it was expecting from the sale, but also resulted in RVSD paying the developers $5.5 million in the legal settlement, racking up legal expenses of another couple $2 million. The district is now operating under a cease and desist order by the state as a result of 38 sewage spills between 2008 and 2011, representing about 3 million gallons of raw sewage spilling into our waterways. RVSD was fined $1.5 million, having been found culpable for the violations because it is responsible for the proper operation and maintenance of its collection system facilities. And I have the standards here that were in the report from the Regional Water Quality Board. Essentially, the 2 largest spills in 2010 were the result of operator error. The second major real estate scandal also occurred after RVSD hired Brett Richards as general manager, after replacing each of the former 3 general managers for reasons largely because they supported consolidation. The district not only had to absorb the $1 million cost of having relocated to the CMSA treatment site, but then purchased an office building for considerably over market value in San Rafael outside the district boundaries. With improvements, this costly real estate blunder has removed another $3 million that should have been used for capital improvements, i.e. fixing our pipes. It took the third real estate scandal to really get the public's and media's attention a loan of $350,000 to Brett Richards, agreed upon by the board without any collateral. Due to his failure to repay the loan and delinquency went to abscond the money, Richards has spent months in jail awaiting trial on 9 felony counts. All 5 directors who hired Richards will be off the board by July of this year, although none have been held legally accountable for the mismanagement of the past 6 years. The same directors increased ratepayers' rates by 95%, but the financial mismanagement has left RBSC in a precarious position. This is where I don't want to incur the same errors of the past 6 years, because although management the past year has seen slight improvement, RBSD is now obligated to fulfill its obligations with the state, not to mention its ratepayers, by complying with an infrastructure asset management plan. And although Greg has gained some respect of the board and other local sewage agencies, we still are contending with an administrative staff that was brought in by Richards, who was party to the mismanagement of the past 6 years. And so the errors of its maligned former general manager of misinforming the public, once again by proposing a rate increase, when in fact the capital it requires to meet its obligations should be obtained by selling its superfluous real estate. The district is presenting the need to raise around $7 million in the next 5 years, and it could obtain more than this by selling assets, as the Marin Civil Grand Jury has pointedly advised the district the past 6 years. So I wish that we would discuss the sale of the property, and as the grand jury said 6 years ago, we don't need to raise rates until that is taken care of.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public who wish to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. For final discussion.
Well, just to throw in a little tidbit on the marks for land use. Other options besides selling. So I just want to throw that out there. There's leasing, but that's a whole other agenda item. I feel disappointed that we didn't have a comparison of just 1% lower. And I talked to Rick, and I guess you need time to put that together. That's what I'm hearing. And I'm wondering, I'm asking the board if we can continue this until we get those figures, so I can feel more comfortable with my board.
What would be the impact on the timeline in restoring the regional water quality board if we asked for those figures by the April meeting?
We
July
would be,
1st.
yeah,
July 1st.
Yeah, July 1 is the deadline for the regional board reporting. When you work the calendar, basically, we're kind of up against the wall timing wise. We don't have a month of extra time. I would, if this is helpful, because I understand the objective entirely, and from our earlier conversations, I would suggest this. Well, let me answer the first question. We can't practically put this off for another full board cycle. My suggestion or recommendation to the board would be to give us direction this evening to come back to you, and this can be in a special board meeting or whatever works for the scheduling, because obviously we're getting into a busy time and limited board member availability. And we can bring you back an updated set of numbers that reflect a lot of the factors we talked about tonight. And we can do that, to kind of use Peter's term, but a little bit differently, sort of under the umbrella that you set by getting the process going this evening. Because that way we don't lose any time in terms of meeting the regulatory deadline. And we can commit to, I'm just going to throw out a rough suggestion here. I mean, if you were to give us even just 1 working week, if that is soon enough, or 2 weeks, pick a date. My recommendation, though, is get the process going. Recognize, you heard it from myself as general manager, your legal counsel has also confirmed, you will not be bound by the numbers that get posted based on what you decide this evening. And if we can bring you back lower numbers, we are already started on that process from the earlier feedback last week. And you can schedule a special board meeting or whatever is your preference for us to review and go through that information If it looks feasible, you'll be prepared at the hearing to take slightly different action than what is represented in the draft notice.
But you're saying go forward with these numbers tonight and then work with.
For the purposes of getting the 218 process going, that would be my recommendation, yes.
You know, I heard you, Pam, I heard you about the final vote, and so I would like for us, if possible, to work out something that you feel comfortable with. Would you be comfortable with that, or do you want to see different numbers in the 218 notice?
I do. And we're going to have April, May, June, before July 1. It's 3 months. You need 3 months?
No,
And you
no.
need 45 days for the 218. But
Under-
I'm kind of surprised that 3 months is not enough time.
Under the current schedule, you'd be able, the best would be able to do, is you would be taking a vote in sometime in the late May timeline, if everything went forward. And then also keep in mind, the next, basically starting next month, April, May, and into May and June, we're going to be bringing you the draft fiscal year 14-15 budget for adoption in June. So the absolute latest, this is the best I can tell you, the latest that we would say meets the requirements is if there's rates adopted in June and we were able to take that evidence to the regional board basically by the end of the month.
Well, that's a good concern, because if you don't have your 4/5 vote, it's going to delay it.
Correct.
Well, no, it won't happen. If there's no 4/5 vote, there'll be no rate increase. We'll be stuck at.
Well, it could go either way.
No, if there's no 4/5 vote, there's no rate increase.
Well, if I remember correctly, we had a rate decrease that night when we voted last for the rate increase. If you remember, Frank?
Back in 2011.
11, yeah, and we adjusted it that night because I didn't think there was a 4/5. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, actually, Pam, that's a good example of what we're getting at here. You had the flexibility that evening, or that last go-round, you had the flexibility as a board to take action on numbers below what had been put out there. And that's exactly what we're saying is.
That's why I really made a big deal about bringing these numbers to
Yeah,
light.
and I understand that.
Because I know that
yeah.
July 1st, I want to do the responsible thing, but
Yeah. Well,
I'm hearing, getting a voice from the community that I really feel like
Yeah.
to hold, you know.
is there, I mean, if we're committing to we're essentially committing to following through on what you're asking for and bringing some new analysis. What we're saying is that yes, that occurs while this notice is out there in the community, and you will have ample time to act on the new information. If we were to have a special board meeting, and just make up a number, 2 weeks from now, you would have that information, you'd be able to give us direction. Nothing changes in terms of when you get to the next step. You have the ability to say, oh, great, we have a solid basis for going 1% below what we recommended initially in all of these. And that's, again, what I would recommend.
It gives them extra.
But my guess is, yeah, Pam, and I think rightfully so. What we mail out is what people are going to be
Correct.
reacting to. So
Correct.
I actually think it would not resonate very well with the community to end up saying, no, oh no, this isn't really what we're going to do now, 2 weeks later.
Sure.
So, I mean, I really want to come to a consensus on this. This is the most important decision that we've had to make in a long time. And so if it's a question of 1% and it's a question of data, is it an unreasonable request to try to do something in the next 2 weeks that changes the numbers in the Prop 218 notice so that a majority of the board, a super majority of the board feels comfortable with it? And I'll take comments from you folks too on what you think about that.
Can I throw one other thing out there, Mary? We have been working on this, as we noted. We don't have what I feel is a well enough vetted set of numbers to put out in public. If you wanted to give us direction this evening to say, put out a notice, because remember, we're still talking about a draft notice, it can be changed after this evening, or as a result of this evening's direction, I should say.
A notice, not this one.
Correct. If you want us to put out the final notice with, well, let me back up, I'm sorry. The work that we've done so far, that Rick has been able to work on, and with Wendy and myself on the financials, there is at least one clear signal we're getting right now, or conclusion, and that is that with some relaxation of what we were talking about earlier, which is the capital budget reserves target at the 5 years out, some relaxation of that target seems at the moment to be one of the most readily identifiable changes. It's a policy decision for the board, and that's okay. And it's obviously within your guys' purview to do that. We're seeing some capability to do something on the average of about a 1% reduction on some of these numbers, tied to a change in this district's policy related to capital reserve. So if you want to give us that direction this evening to say, post a notice that shows a rate schedule modified from this draft by, I'm going to suggest 1%. And then we can bring you back, and I guess what I'm saying is I'm comfortable enough from the numbers I've heard so far that we could bring you back a workable solution that works within those constraints. So the notice that goes out would reflect roughly a 1% reduction in these rates, and we'd be bringing back the substantiating information at your direction, whether it's 2 weeks from now or whenever on the special budget. So Pam, to your concerns, what would actually go out into the community as final, I should say, because the draft obviously is out there, would reflect that 1% reduction.
We don't have the numbers though.
We have some preliminary, that's what I was getting at. That's one clear signal we've seen, is that if we want to go, rough numbers, if you want to go from about 18 million reserves to about 15, 16 at the 5 year, Rick's analysis has already shown that does translate into about that level of change. So I would much prefer to see us compromise this evening and get the process going and not back ourselves into a corner timing-wise, if that meets your concerns.
So let me ask you a question. So this 1%, instead of 49%, 48%? Or is it 1% a year instead of?
7%.
Each of those individual numbers, Frank, instead of 8, it'd be 7, instead of 6, it would be 5, etc. It's essentially, and that the cumulative effect is obviously a little bit more than the sum, but yeah, to be clear, that's what we're talking about. So
I have no doubt if we came up with a bond measure program that we put on a November ballot, and we went to the state regional water cooperative board and said, we're putting a $64 million bond measure on the ballot advisory. We're going to go out and sell it to the community. We're going to explain what's wrong, why do we have to do what we have to do, how much it's going to take to sell these bonds. I think the Regional Water Quality Control Board would say they're making a good faith effort to try to meet these needs.
You might relax the restrictions on it.
Well, I'm not sure about relaxing restrictions, but I mean, but you know, if we're making a good faith effort to go on the ballot and sell $64 million in bonds, in advisory, I'd feel more comfortable
You still have to
with
do
community support rather than myself being the one making the decision. Oh, we're going to sell X amount of dollar in bonds, we're going to raise your rates. It's about community buy-in and then the community understanding what we need to do and saying we support the direction.
I return to the question, I guess I was kind of trying to ask everyone, if we could come up with a 218 notice that reflected approximately 1% decrease in per year in these rates, is that something that the whole board could get? Would members of the board be able to get behind that? Would that meet the concerns that you're expressing? If we saw them.
Yeah, but it's kind of like a shot in the dark. I
Can
don't
you-
have
can
the
you-
numbers, you
can
know what
you
I'm
vote on
saying? We
something
don't have,
positive?
pardon?
Can you vote on something positive? Can you say what you can vote on? Because all I hear is you can't vote. You don't have enough information to vote. What
Well,
do you need to vote?
I asked a week ago,
I know what you asked for,
and
and I
it's
know you
not here.
can't do
So
it.
until those figures come back, you want to put it out with 7%. I just don't have the figures. You want me to vote on something where I don't have the figures?
And what I heard earlier was that the vote tonight will potentially impact the consideration of the bond of.
We're offering you two options, and obviously you can pick others at your discretion. We're offering an option that says, go with these numbers because they're a maximum, and we can bring you back essentially as much analysis as you'd like to see over the next 30 days. And you can act on that analysis. You will not be precluded based on what you have put into the public notice. So that is option number one. We've offered the other option, which says, we heard clearly previously that we'd sure like to see you notch these down. If there's any way to do that, somewhere in the range of 1% or so, just show that there's some way of bringing these down. What we've said is that so far we have one clear way that we'll do that. So we're saying we can work within those parameters and bring you back that analysis on pretty near term and go from there. So we're not offering perfection, but we're offering you basically at least two options this evening. My recommendation is to pick one of them so that we're in compliance with the timelines, and your information needs are still going to be met in a timely manner. They're just not going to be met this evening.
I'm fine with it. You know, if people don't like it, they'll show up, and then we'll vote again. So they go lower.
So
So
that
describe
concerns me.
precisely what you're playing with. I'm not sure because he's.
You got
Okay, well, just a moment. Let's finish this board discussion. What are we?
Well, I'd love to speak now. I'm prepared to make a recommendation, all right? Now, I'm prepared to make a recommendation to approve the draft notice as amended when Greg first came to us regarding the factor of 215 gallons per day as applied to the winter season billing language. And then, of course, on the back of the amended document for this attachment A, the reference to the hearing being on Wednesday, May 21st, 2014, and to direct staff to finalize an issue to partial owners this notice with the caveat of Director Meg's request. And I can't be so specific as, okay, well, I'm not willing to say 1% per year for the next 5 years, but if I have to, I will. Is that what you're looking for? Are the variance and the numbers that support that for the next 5-year plan?
It would feel more comfortable.
Okay. Can you vote
It's
on
just
it?
a little discern.
Can you vote on it in that?
I mean, I don't know exactly what it's going to project out, but I think it's $7 a year. Is that right, Rick?
Well,
$7 a year.
I'm confident that your staff can definitely give you the firm numbers, what that would look like.
22,000 EDUs, is that right?
There's 22,000
22,000
EDUs.
EDUs, so, okay.
So is that an?
Follow the question?
I'm not clear on.
Yeah,
what
I want to
you're
repeat.
asking for.
So as I understand it, that your motion is that we,
Follow the
well,
recommendation.
in substance, this isn't, I'm not, accept this, but we're going to change the draft to reflect our discussion tonight about numbers.
Yes.
With the broad description that they will be reducing the increase by 1% per year from what we see here.
And that will be reflecting a implicit policy decision by the board this evening that we are relaxing the 5-year target for the capital reserve funds to absorb that reduction in forecasted revenue. So that would be the consistent package of actions you're kind of directing this evening.
And from my looking at it, it really only changes table 1, right? Is the percentage or the discussion of the precise raise, of the raise?
It
Anywhere
will
else?
just, in terms of the notice, it will just change the table number 1 notice, correct? We would update those numbers accordingly.
And this is based on flow differential, correct?
Yes.
The flow
Do you mean the flat rate differential rate structure?
Yeah.
Yes.
But the flow differential, is that?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Between single family and R and multiple?
No, it's in here, it's in here.
Frank, will you be back in time to vote on the 28th if we do it the 28th?
I fly out of Pisa on the 28th.
So it doesn't matter.
The 29th.
I'm coming back through London, so.
29th.
Is that specific enough?
So we're,
From a legal perspective, I think we all understand what we're doing. I just gotta get it
Yeah,
out.
and so what I understand is this chart is going to be revised to reflect a lower rate, and so when this goes out, that is going to be the proposed rates, the maximum proposed rates.
And it'll be based on a policy change by the board about what we will have in the reserves.
correct.
And if
Yes,
it's policy.
and then there'll be another
Well,
vote,
do we-
so
I
it
don't know
could
if we-
change again.
Well, that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I don't
because
wanna-
I don't
I'm not
want us
interested.
to, I was cautioning you earlier,
Right.
we cannot pick apart the financial package that is reflected in these rates. So if you know, that is why I'm concerned about it. So I'd like you to have a very limited number of items you're saying, these are the dials we can turn. One is reserves, one is something else. If we do not have some limitations and some consistency in what variables you're going to revisit, beyond all of this based on information that has been put together over the past 12 months, then I am concerned
No, I
where
think-
that takes us.
I think we're confident, and I actually think it makes sense to do it with the reserves, because if we do sell the Larkspur Landing property, or we do get a
Those are
CMSA San Quentin settlement, that will
Or
be,
both.
yes. So I actually think it makes a lot of sense.
Do we
And
need
let's
to
see what
change
the
the reserve
community's
policy
got.
or simply acknowledge that we're not going to
All you need to
reach
do
our
this evening
guidelines?
is we're acknowledging it.
That we're not going to reach
Carry
it.
it forward.
Yeah.
We'll-
Because that's best practice. That reserve policy is best practice in the industry, and I hate to vote against best practice because we couldn't agree on something.
My point of mentioning is that we're not willy-nilly saying the rates are 1% lower.
Yeah.
We're saying the rates have went to that because
Because
we
we're
have
accepting a lower.
accepted the fact that the reserve targets will be lower than we originally forecasted. And that's fine, that's completely consistent. So if that's the direction, that's what we can do.
All right, so, Pat,
I'm okay with that.
okay.
And a reserve in there? Rick, on 1% lower, what do you think it'll, the reserve, how it'll cut the reserve?
I think that's what we looked at, was between 15 and 16 million, instead of the 18.1.
Okay.
So 3 million, 2, 3 million.
About, yeah.
Do I have to read it
So,
again?
should Pat restate the motion?
Sure.
Someone's
I'd like to
perspective.
approve the draft notice as amended to include the language that was brought to us this evening, which is fairly simple. It just reflects the factor of 215 gallons per day is applied to the winter season billing data in order to calculate the base number of EDUs prior to the application of the strength factor, and also to reflect the discussion we just had, which speaks to including the information that would show the adjustment downward if we were to
Table one.
to table
Table one.
1.
Legally sufficient? Do I have a second?
Clear.
All right, thank you, Pat. Do I have a second for that motion?
And are we keeping the same date?
Oh, yeah, change the 21st.
I said so, yes.
Yeah. So we're going on the 21st.
21st.
Frank's not going
Okay,
to.
I'll second that.
Okay, Glasgow Sullivan? Do we, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, 4-1, the motion passes. Thank you. Sure, let's take a short break.
Thank you.
Come back for item number 8. Item 752. Item number 8, consideration of authorizing the general manager to issue a request for proposals for design of the gravity sewer rehab project for fiscal year 2014. For those, if anybody wasn't in the room, we're continuing item number 7 until the next meeting. That's why we're not addressing that item.
I'll give a quick introduction on this. So we're just wrapping up for this current fiscal year, what we call the Group A and Group B sewer rehab projects. And we are simply, what this is doing is teeing up the next annual cycle to get the next construction contract out for the next fiscal year of gravity sewer rehab projects. So this is seeking approval to go ahead and just issue the request for proposal for design services only, so that we can get that going. The big change, this is probably the first time in the district's recent history that we're taking this approach. In other words, we're finally at the point where what's in front of you this evening reflects what I'll generally call the new approach to the gravity sewer rehab methods. Meaning the recommended 4 to 5 miles of work that we're looking at is the results of the IEMP. It's a result of the risk model assessments. And it is being done as a single design and most likely a single construction contract, which should hopefully be much more efficient than past approaches of breaking the work up. And this is generally the process that we're anticipating to be repeated over the next roughly 5 years as we go through the process of completing the condition assessment of the remaining roughly 30% of the system, running the risk model, and continually identifying basically the top highest priority portions of the system each year. We're allowing for a mix of construction construction methods. There's nothing prescriptive in the RFP. The whole point is to let the design process look at each area and select the most cost-efficient construction method at that time. So again, unlike prior projects, we are not saying this will all be pipe burst or this will all be CIPP. That will be determined based on the design process and based on a standard evaluation, which you see in an example of, I should say, in the flow chart. So this money is in the budget. It's for design services only. I do want to clarify. You'll see the reference to 5 miles, and we've typically been talking about a 4 mile per year target. What that's representing is actually two numbers. It's about 3.7 miles of basically replacement, where that line is either going to be entirely lined, like in the CIPP, or entirely replaced via pipe bursting or open cut. And it has about 1.3 miles of mileage that is made up, and this is again reflective of the new approach, it's made up of targeted spot repairs that achieve the intent of the regulatory order, which is to get that part of the system stable and operating safely, etc. But it's going in and achieving that 1.3 miles of rehab credit, so to speak, via essentially selective use of spot repairs. So that's why you end up with what in round numbers we're calling 5 miles. Other than that, this would all be following standard district process. The RFP is obviously the first step. We would bring you back for your consideration eventually any design contract that would be awarded. You have a figure in the staff report. It's a map of 2 yellow polygons that shows the target area for this work. And those areas are a subset of the roughly 8 to 9 miles that were the highest priority work identified in the IMP and through the risk assessment model. So this is definitely putting the next year's projects into the highest priority areas of the system in terms of risk reduction and level of service improvement. To be clear, we're not saying all of the pipes within that yellow shaded polygon are going to be addressed. That's just the area of the work. The actual individual pipe segments will be scattered all throughout there, those two yellow areas. There's a map you've seen in the past, but it's not in this report, that has, I think, close to roughly 8 to 9 polygons. And those each represent the areas that were highlighted as the high priority targets from the IMP work. So again, this is just a subset of that work. The rest of your package has, again, this is all standard content at this point. You have the draft RFP. There's a flow chart. You have not seen this before. It's just to help you, it's just to illustrate. I know it's a little bit hard to follow. I'm not intending to go through it. The point of showing you this flow chart is this is reflective of the process we developed this past fiscal year, working with the current design team that sets up a consistent method for pouring the condition assessment information, the risk model information, and the construction method evaluation information to get us to selecting the most cost-efficient choice of construction methods out of the 3 or 4 most common types. So that's the only reason we're showing this, or showing it just to illustrate that process. Again, that's otherwise it's a standard RFP content, and with that I'll hand it back to the board.
Thank you. Board members, questions, comments?
Question? Well, I'll start. Just on page 2 of the contract, there's 3 options, 1, 2, and 3. Do we give the bidder the choice of the options, or do we determine the options?
Yeah. So typically we would end up specifying one of those, Frank. These are placeholders for our general contract, and before this is again just a draft example. Once we got to the position of, or the point of recommending a specific contract, we would have picked one of those options.
And the other 2 we drop.
Correct.
When it goes actually out to bid.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out exactly where we are. So it looks like it's from the hub back up into towards Sleepy Hollow. If you were describing it right.
I think so. Yeah.
Where folks could understand, the map's one thing, but it looks like it's taking the hub and going west, and then going around San Francisco Boulevard, maybe in Los Angeles, going around them, and then getting up to not actually, well, maybe part of Sleepy Hollow. Is that go to Sleepy Hollow?
Yeah.
Goes next to it, yeah.
It's next to it.
Yeah, so this is Broadmoor, Indian Rock, Berkeley Avenue, maybe near the Alameda, and then over into, they haven't gone over the Hawthorne Hills yet, but they're definitely
No, not there.
heading west
Sure.
of Sir Francis Drake 2 over to, what is that, Merced and Sierra, and
Up to Butterfield Road, it looks like, right?
Butterfield comes in right here,
yeah.
The other little patch of yellow, that's not a green, where is it? Is that Tinfield, Greenbrick?
That is Tinfield.
That's across from the pump station there. It's
Yeah.
in very low territory.
And what do we call that neighborhood?
Barron's is one of the.
Mary's neighborhood.
Barron's is one of the.
Barron's, Roseport.
McAllister.
Is
McAllister.
that McAllister the name of it?
There's a name for the name, I just can't find that. So most of these pipes are 6-inch and 8, or 6 to 12, 6 to 12, some are 6, some are 12.
I think most commonly 6 to 8.
Most commonly 6-inch, but it ranges up to 12 inches in diameter.
And so we have already TV'd all of these pipes. We know what's in the ground. We know what the problems are in the he is
Correct.
saying.
Yeah.
We got that. Okay. The last time we did this, we put a cap on it, on the price. So we had 7 bidders, and the high bidder got it. The previous time, the same high bidder got the last one and got the previous one. At some point, are we gonna start losing some of our bidders because they're gonna go, you know what, we bid, we spent a lot of money, a lot of time preparing the bids, and they give it to B and C twice now. So,
I've heard that scuttlebutt on the street and that some may not even quote on some of the work we give out.
well, I haven't heard it, I'm just thinking to myself, well, are they gonna say to us, you know what, we're not gonna bother with you folks at Lost Valley anymore because we try to give you a good bid and you give it to B and C. So I'm just
Yeah.
kind of speaking on the top of my head. Now, I notice there's no not to exceed on this one.
You're not mistaken. And that, in all honest seriousness, you know, that language for an RFP for design services, it was language that was not in there in the past, and we started using it. It was not in our, for me professionally, when you're doing design services like that, we're, at this stage in the game, we are providing an estimate only, and we need to see what this is not a low bid construction type contract. It's a qualifications based professional services contract. So it's more appropriate to say our estimate is this, and then we'll see what the respondents come back with.
When we had the not to exceed, 6 of the 7 bidders did not exceed that number.
True. That is true. Yeah.
Is this for design, engineering, inspection, and project management? Or
No.
is this a very narrow
Yeah.
scope here?
And that's a bit of a change from our prior one, Frank. This is strictly for design services only. It's to get us a set of biddable contract documents, and we will determine services during construction and construction management separately from this.
Will we put another RFP out for
We
that?
have a couple of choices.
Do we do it in-house? Do we have in-house?
We have very limited for a project of this size, but we would have 2 choices. If we were very satisfied with whoever was doing this work, we could say, let's talk about services during construction, because that's a sort of a common amendment. Or we would say, let's go out for a separate RFP to get construction management and SDC, services during construction. So this was one of the things we sort of wrestled with when we were putting this one together, is as an organization, we're still trying to figure out the best way to efficiently go through this cycle every year, where we're going to be doing roughly 4 plus miles of rehab a year. And there are at least 3 or 4 basic models of what I call project delivery we could follow. And we're sort of in the try something and see how it works phase at this point still. So this is fairly traditional. This is, hey, go get a design consultant, give us a design package that we can put on the street construction bidding. Very, very traditional approach and nothing else. We talked about some of the pros and cons of different approaches, and for the moment, we said, let's just be conservative, let's just do a simple standard design contract. So that's what we elected. But again, so just to give you an example, some of the other models we could follow would be similar to what we did in the past, where we take design, SDC, or services during construction and construction management, we put those into one package. We could take design only and say, we're going to let a contract for the next 2 or 3 years of design services to one design team. And the idea here is that we're trying to find the most efficient way to deliver the work. That's the basic idea. And we haven't really quite figured that out yet. These are all good options, and different organizations use them based on their own considerations. They're not right or wrong. And we have not quite settled on what that long-term picture looks like for the district. So I would emphasize, though, this is This is now a very limited, very traditional, just go do design services for the district, nothing else.
In 2012, that spill we had December 2012, in that heavy rain, that occurred there because of the blockage by Sanitary High School. And it looks like this is going to deal with that area, going to include that.
That was on the Broadmoor line, and this is generally partially the Broadmoor region, side streets like Meadowcroft, Berkeley, and a few others.
So if this were done a few years ago, would we have not had that spill on Broadmoor?
Can't speculate.
Don't know.
Okay. I think the fact is, no matter how much work we do here, there's going to be spills. People stuff things down the toilet, they block up the lines, and it's almost inevitable that we're going to have spill, even in our best part of the system. So,
Well, that spill on Broadmoor was a big old root, wasn't it?
A big taproot.
Yeah, so that was something that we could have remediated, and it wouldn't block up there, it probably block up 20 feet. So,
okay.
That's why I want to start talking more about waste and what start more education.
Well, we've got $200,000 in
I know.
a program for rainwater, water minerals, water conservation, reduction.
Well, they're
of
taking
transport.
18,000 out a month now.
Yeah.
Just right now, we just want to know the financials for
Well,
that.
Kumar was said he was going to come over and help us put together a rebate program. Has he ever come over?
Yeah, there's
I'm not sure, I think you might be mixing up two different topics, I'm not sure.
I'm talking about the.
Yeah, you're talking about the monies we set aside for the
Greywater.
for grants.
Right, yeah.
Right, and Pam, you're referring to
Something
public
else.
outreach and,
Yeah, but
Yeah,
sorry.
different.
yeah, no, that's
Getting
okay.
late.
Yeah.
But, what was I gonna say?
Has Kumar ever come over and said, here, we put together a rebate program for you for your program?
Not
Last
yet.
time I saw him, he said he was going to do that.
The short answer is no.
And the last CMSA board meeting I was at, I think there was some discussion on when's this going to get going.
Other RFP. Any other board member questions on this item? Any questions or comment from the public on this item? Then I'll bring it back to the board and
I would
ask.
so move them to authorize the general manager to issue requests for proposals for design work only for fiscal year 2015 sewer gravity sewer rehabilitation projects in an amount estimated to be $600,000.
Thank you. Second?
Second, I'll second that.
Andrew Sullivan, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Andrew Heaney? Yes. Okay. Unanimous, thank you. All right, now we move on to item number 9, discussion of MIRA. Greg.
Okay, so this actually, we have this in front of you, or at least part of the board package, I should say, in the past month, but we continued it. This is a timely item that, and MIRA is something that the board probably doesn't hear much about very often. MIRA is the Marin Emergency Radio Authority, and we have had a long-term arrangement with MIRA to locate one of the radio repeaters that we use up on the site they have at the Forge Reservoir. So that site is actually a Marin Municipal Water District facility. So MIRA is a leasee to the water district, and we in turn are essentially a leasee to MIRA. And what we came to find, so what brought this to our attention was there is a MMWD project to do some major overhaul work at that reservoir site. That in turn triggered some construction activity to modify the existing MIRA radio facility at the reservoir. And then by extension, MIRA turned to both Ross Valley and Las Colinas, who are we have the same contractual arrangement, and we are committed. We have a funding commitment to help pay for the MIRA the Mira facility modifications that are required up there to accommodate the MMWD reservoir project. So there's kind of some dominoes here. But when we got to working on this, and Randall's been the primary staff person on this, working with Mira and MMWD and others, it came to our attention that we were not actually members of Mira for whatever reason. And the history is
Somebody made the right decision. Go ahead.
Okay. so we weren't clear why that might be, and we thought there might be advantages to actually being a regular member of Mira. So the staff report is really addressing two items. One is informational, because we have an existing contract commitment. It's fairly modest. It's about $12,000 to help fund the undergrounding of some utilities that serve the Mira radio site. So that's action that we're already committed to contractually, and again, it's readily covered within our budget, and we are in regular coordination with Mira and MMWD on the design and the activities that they're taking at the site. That sort of teed up the related item, which is what we're looking for direction on this evening, which is whether we would want to just go ahead and pursue membership in Mira, and the reasons for doing that would be to really basically to improve our access to other sites that might be useful for some future SCADA improvements, because the radio sites are typically, just for very practical reasons, your optimal places to locate the most common types of SCADA communication, which is essentially what's referred to as unlicensed radio. So we're looking at membership in Mira as something to explore that might have benefits to the district down the road. And really what we're looking for this evening is just feedback from the board on that idea and direction on whether it's something you would like staff to go explore. If we don't do that, nothing changes. We retain this contractual relationship to have access to the use of the Forbes Reservoir site for our current radio communications, and we go on as usual. So again, to be clear, there's nothing that has to happen. We'll clear this construction project. We're in the funding commitment with Mira. But if the board's direction is to begin at least evaluating membership more formally, we would come back to it at a future date with a report and most likely an actionable item for formal membership. And for that, I'll hand it back to the board.
So we're using this to, we have radio signals that
Right.
pass through it as a way
Exactly.
to manage our
Yeah,
district.
so when our service trucks are out running around our service area, which has some challenging topography, as you guys all know, that radio site is what we're utilizing to communicate on the truck radios, and also to the base station that is back at the Kerner admin building. So that's what it's used.
And so we might want more of those, we might want access to more
Well,
of their sites?
Potentially, and that would really be somewhat for a second, separate purpose, which would be for the SCADA communications. And to put it quite simply, you already have a tower there, it already has some communications equipment on it. To utilize it for SCADA, generally you're coming in and adding a fairly modest piece of equipment that is then utilized by our SCADA system as a communication link as well. Same basic concept as the radios that we're using it for now, just a slightly different purpose. So, not to muddy the water, that is something we'd consider doing down the road if we were members of Mira.
So I'm confused, is there more than one site that we would then have access to, or is this the
Yes.
only
Yes.
site? Okay.
There would be
And we would
multiple
need
sites
that
we
for
would have
SCADA.
access to. It gives us the most flexibility in the future.
Well, and then for SCADA, I must admit that I might be a bit ignorant on some of this, but you need SCADA ability up there to give you more dependable or redundancy features to your SCADA, to be monitoring your mechanical systems down in the Kentfield, Green Bay, Larkspur
Basically, yeah. I mean, this is very conceptual at this point. The district, in the past, when we were making efforts on SCADA, which have been stalled for the past couple of
Right.
years, we made a decision, and I'm not sure on all the details, but we did not pursue the unlicensed radio option as a communication link from the stations. And that is by far the most common. It's a highly reliable method. It's what's used to some degree by a lot of the existing utilities here. And we didn't explore that, or we decided not to explore it. So access to the mirror facilities, just like access to MWP tank sites or any other real estate that has favorable topography, just gives us the flexibility to say, well, what's the optimal mix of stations?
Well, like you mentioned, our radios in our vehicles, it's invaluable to be able to have that ability to communicate vehicle to vehicle through, I think, a filtered channel that we use so we don't get patched over. We get that through the county. What I'm curious about is I've heard a lot of negativity about mirror over the years. But when managed properly, it's invaluable, especially when you got landlines down or you got some sort of flooding challenge or whatever. But how is our one channel that we use? Do we have two now?
Yeah, A and B.
A and B.
It's a massive.
Channel 3 A and B, or?
Yeah, so it's a huge safety factor, yeah.
Okay. What I can't stand is the interference when you're trying to get something serious done, which is always, I'm sure. But
The new models are really crystal clear.
okay, just checking. It's been a while since, we use it in Sausalito, so.
And we'll maintain that no matter what.
Yeah,
we,
so
what
you're
we
just
have.
building up what's already happened.
You're gonna just bring back something that says what they can do and how much.
Right, we would go explore, we'd have discussions with Mira, we'd get details on any funding commitments and so forth. I want to be clear, yeah, that these are potential benefits of Mira membership.
I get it.
The primary focus here is just, is the taking care of the immediate project up there, and then whether, again, it brought to light the question, we weren't sure, given all the agencies that are members of MIRA, why we had elected not to, and was it something we wanted to revisit?
Cost is probably one. I would imagine 60 to 100,000 to join.
I don't know, so that's.
Their system's failing.
Yeah.
Our police departments and sheriff's departments having trouble with communications. County fire doesn't use MIRA. County fire uses their own system because there's so many problems. They're going to put a bond measure, maybe up to $30 million on a November ballot for MIRA. So I think we have to know just what it's going to cost us here. Are we going to get rid of all our cell phones then, so we can save money there?
There's one more system of redundancy.
Yeah, those are things we want to explore, Frank. We would look at those. I want to be clear. At this point, staff we're sort of starting at square one with the discussions. I don't really have any preconceptions about the pros and cons, and if those are important points.
Yeah, I would just concentrate on getting pipes fixed rather than running around trying to deal with the mirror and trying to look at a system that's going to cost us a lot of money.
Well, the one comment I listened to Greg on, listen to all of them, but the need to be able to give a more dependable connection for SCADA down the road makes sense. If in fact that's what you get, right? Because they'd still have to retrofit in what we need to their radio tower. It gives us a site.
Right.
Okay. Not necessarily their signal, but their site.
Right, and they are just one option. That when you talk about SCADA specifically, it's just a matter of where it's favorable real estate, who owns it, and what are the terms and conditions of access.
My Uncle Joe lives right below that dam on Santa Margarita. I bet you do it for $10.95. Right on top of the real fake simulated Christmas tree.
Other side of the street.
Some places a list of all
Well, that's
the
good.
members of
He's
MIRA.
right.
I'm not sure if Los Angeles Valley Sanitary District belongs or CMSA belongs. I don't know.
I don't know.
Probably CMSA does, or they don't have the need.
They don't.
Okay.
Belong to MIRA. Every fire and police in town in the county belongs to MIRA.
Yeah, except county fire.
So most.
I think county
universities-
fire belongs, but they don't use it.
Yeah, I don't think you want to pursue membership, I think you want to get plus and
I read local concierge in the house, they're not using it.
Story
Well, they might use
point.
something else.
I mean, they use their own system, county fire.
Okay, any more questions from the board, or can I go out to the public for comments or questions on this item? Okay. I'll bring it back to the board. My sense is that we are inclined not to take any action on this at this time.
Well, I'd like to get the pluses and minuses. I think Frank's got a lot of information, and I think we can come back with a one-page, these are the pluses, these are the minuses, and how much it costs. But I certainly wouldn't vote to pursue membership.
Okay, great. So can we just
More
give staff direction to bring us back to some more information?
We'll simply go
Get all the dirt.
minimal amount to help us figure out if it's even worth the count.
Right, and I mean, what I'm hearing is, we might want to use it for SCADA, there might be other options, and we're not moving
We can
forward
do it
on
later.
SCADA that quickly right now.
Right, and our system is stable, the radios, the primary use, which is the only use, which is the radios, are, as far as I know, are working fine. So, we won't go any further with it than
Okay.
getting some basic facts. So, okay.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 10, consideration of adopting resolution 1474, adopting a fraud reporting policy.
Okay.
I guess I'm happy to explain that in the board packet was included an earlier draft of this. The finance committee reviewed the proper draft when it was brought to the HR committee. We looked at what was in the board packet, and this was accidentally put in. So Greg handed out before the meeting to us the actual red line. If we're comfortable reviewing this tonight, we can. If we'd like to continue this to another meeting, we also can. This was some, oh, sorry, I'm kind of taking over.
No.
So this is what happens when you tell me the day before.
We got it all.
They're gonna do all about it.
But staff
Usually I just say Greg.
Hey, that's all correct. And I apologize for any confusion. We realized in the middle of the HR committee meeting earlier this week that we had inadvertently put one earlier draft in the board package than we intended. So at the beginning of the meeting, I gave you a red line markup of the proper one, and so you could see the actual, what was intended to be the language. So this is an entirely new policy. We do not have one on the books currently, and it was a recommendation from the last fiscal audit. And we've been trying to prioritize their various policy recommendations because some are somewhat not as important. And this one was both fairly succinct, and when we looked at good examples from other districts and from the industry organizations. So it seemed like an excellent one to just bring right up and get it through. So what you have in front of you tonight is actually consideration of adopting the draft policy that you have. And that's really, we have reviewed it both with the HR committee and the finance committee in the past. And we have everyone who participated in that here this evening to answer any questions.
I had asked a question to Christian about a conflict
Oh,
of interest.
I'm sorry, I apologize, Pam, you did,
Because
you
of the
mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting.
Criminal investigation.
Yeah, okay, do you want to address that?
Yeah, he and I talked about it, and we didn't think that it had any bearing on you being a witness or possible witness in this case.
Thank you.
It seems so generic and straightforward. It's sort of a should be done kind of thing. You know, it should have been done kind of thing. Sorry, we didn't do it.
Well, we are, I mean, one of the good things from this last audit was they seem to do maybe a relatively better job than the previous ones on that particular focus, and meaning identifying gaps in our current policies. And we know that we've identified a lot of administrative stuff like that in the past year. This is just one of them. It's relatively straightforward, and it may seem kind of obvious, but that's all the more reason to have it on the books. You need it.
Well, I can just say it's becoming more and more required with local agencies. The auditors are
That's
bringing
a
it.
list of policies, and this
Yeah,
is one of them.
one of them, yeah. And I've
Do you
even.
know what the list is? Maybe you should bring that to us.
I believe Sophia knows what the list is.
Do you know-
I mean, in terms of HR-related things.
Yeah, well, this came up from a finance one, and there were a couple other policies that we're looking at from the finance.
Yeah, I can get a list of it because I know,
I mean, if they're coming, if they're being required, we might as well get a head start.
one audit that some local agency members had to, they wanted them to actually sign. They were unaware or not aware of any fraud or suspected fraud, and they had to sign like under penalty of perjury, and they didn't like it. I mean, it was quite, it was quite
At the
direct.
hospital, we sign a conflict of interest policy and a confidentiality policy every year. It's required for all positions on the committees.
I'll get a list of the list of financial.
Quickly, on the redlining of the district is required to report any suspected theft loss. So I'm just curious why that was redlined. Which one are my, is it just the end result?
Yeah.
That is
Just
the,
curious, I mean, shouldn't we have that in there? I can see the last part being taken out, the assets to the president of the board, but by law, we have to report.
Well, the sentence is the district is required to report to the president of the board, and so I think that was taken out. Because reporting it to the president of the board, I think.
that was, yes, that was language we did not intend to have in there. You have a broader range of reporting options under the proposed policy, which is, I think, generally deemed more recommended. A person can report to, I think it's 4 different, at their choice, the individual, they can elect to report to any of, I think, 4 different responsible parties within the organization. So,
Is that in here?
Yes.
yes.
So the procedure.
Oh.
Yeah, I actually think that's one of the strengths of it, is that there are four different people in the organization to whom someone can report fraud, and they get to choose.
Right.
It's not forcing folks into a chain of command that might make them feel uncomfortable.
Exactly.
On page Roman numeral 44, I'm looking at the other one, but I think it's the same for the red line. On a formal inquiry, he says, when a formal inquiry is warranted, an investigator will be assigned to conduct an impartial investigation. Who might that be? Is there anything spelled out here? Are we going to hire someone, or?
Do you want to address that?
We left that broad on purpose. That was part of our discussion because given the nature of the allegation, it could require some fairly specific skill sets to properly investigate it, and you might need to retain an external investigator to have those skill sets available.
Don't we want an impartial investigator? Conduct those investigations as opposed to and I mean, it seems to me that the impartial is in the wrong place.
Well, you know, I think you can put impartial in a couple of places and it would be appropriate, but I don't think the implication is that they have to be an outsider to be impartial. Certainly there are connections within an organization that would lead you to think that's too close, but there are places in organizations where you think, yes, that person has appropriate knowledge and they're far enough away they can be impartial.
So did this come from another agency? It must have come from another agency. Did we get this from some?
Yeah, do you
some
guys,
agency?
it's a, I'll defer as well.
Yeah, it was an agency in Southern California. It was just a sample policy that was provided to us by the auditor as one that they felt really passed muster.
Okay.
It's fairly typical of what I've seen.
Back it up, Roman number 4, page 44. So if a formal inquiry is open, will the employee be Mirandized at some point here?
Well, it depends what the nature of the inquiry is. A Miranda warning is a criminal investigation. If we were going to refer it out,
Always look at a criminal act?
well, you just don't. You don't always know what you've got.
Okay.
And I don't think any of us is a peace officer, so we're not issuing Miranda warnings. But certainly, if the matter was significant enough or serious enough, or we had enough evidence to truly believe a crime as opposed to some inappropriate waste or something had been committed and we were referring it out, there would be the full criminal process.
On the other side of it, I'm looking at an employee rights issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's my former Teamster Union president hat that I wear.
Right.
So, I think there has to be something in here that deals with, have we run this by the union?
Well,
Just as a matter of fact, to see what they think.
yeah, I'm meeting with them Friday,
Okay.
so we'll talk about that. But employees have due process rights with discipline firmly established in California and in the district. If an employee is going to be interviewed as part of the investigation, they have a right to bring a union representative with them, and then certainly if some disciplinary action is taken as a result, they have Skelly hearings and they have appeal processes. This does not preclude all of those rights from happening, because anything that occurred to that employee would go through the disciplinary due process.
You said appeal process?
Yes.
How do you do an appeal process?
According to your rules, after a discipline is imposed, an employee can essentially appeal it to the board of directors.
That's the final step in it.
Yes.
There's a grievance process.
We're kind of mixing up two separate issues.
That's not good.
But that's a disciplinary appeal that I'm talking about
Right.
there, which would be a potential outcome, although not an invariable outcome of a fraud investigation.
This, I understand this simply to encourage reporting of fraud by employees in a way
Yes.
that protects them.
No retaliation.
No fear of
It wouldn't
retaliation.
launch into a personnel process necessarily.
No, because sometimes people think something's wrong, and when we look into it, we discover you just did not have enough information.
It's a refreshing change.
Any other comments or questions? Any comments in the public on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Are we comfortable with moving forward with this?
Well, I think I would like to have the union take a look at it, just to make sure that they don't think that we're, they're going to understand what we're doing. I mean,
Sure.
They arrested a state senator today for everything from gun running to like 9 felonies. So I mean, we're not alone. We're not alone in making the papers.
So, can we do something in principle and then get?
Oh yeah, sure.
Continue it.
I hate to say we're pro fraud.
No, it's a sense about it. We're going in the right direction. So let's have.
And then I
Let's continue the
recommend,
process.
well, yeah, and then she'll look into it, and then if there's no problems, we can bring it back on consent.
Right, absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Done.
All right,
Excellent.
thank you.
Good work, team.
Our last agenda item, verbal report by board members and requests for future agenda items. I think this is a record for us.
We started an hour early.
Daylight savings time.
We need to clear that.
I think I sent you one that's a closed item.
There was no last meeting this month.
Any other oral reports?
Well,
Board members?
CMSA is moving forward with MMWD. We're going to put out an RFP. for consultants. These consultants, they seem to do quite well in this business. And the consultant's going to take we're going to come up with the RFP for this wastewater reuse, reclamation, reuse, recycling opportunities that may be available. We're using a state, part of a state grant and part of CMSA money and part of MMWD money. And hopefully we're going to go in a direction where we can start reusing some of the, we treat from 7 million to 11 million gallons a day of wastewater at CMSA, and most of it gets just discharged the day after it's treated. We may have to raise our treatment levels. I didn't realize we're above secondary and we're under tertiary, so I just found that out too, and I didn't.
But we have fish swimming in it, don't we?
I'm not sure.
Is that a fish tank from the water?
I don't think
That
so.
fish tank that you have in the office?
That's trout.
Yeah, that's it's a biosky test tank.
Yeah, it's our own water.
Fish kill.
Is that our own water? You have trout swimming?
Yeah, you're allowed to.
Brown trout.
Fingerling.
Did we solve the salt problem? We're going ahead and.
Well, no, that's going to be part of the study to look at we're gonna do some testing, and see what, you know, what the saline content is, and look at some options here of how we may be able to reuse the wastewater.
Did you read the article on getting the salt out? That I sent you?
Jason and Peter have.
Well, and remember now, one of the board members, two of the board members just wanted to get that going. And you guys are all moving in the right direction now. Okay, go ahead.
The solar thing to be put on the next, I don't know if the next agenda will work. And also zero waste. We are zero waste, Renee Goddard from Fairfax. Hopefully it'll be a short presentation.
And we've got both those, yeah, and I've got them on our planning calendar, I've got Renee on the planning calendar, and it sounds like that's probably gonna be, either April or May between her, so we're in good shape on that.
On a solar, you might get a hold of Minnesota Mosquito Vector Control District. Phil Smith is the manager up there. He wasn't the manager when we did the solar program, but we had about $7 million in reserves. They was earning, I think, 1.2% or 1.3% interest off of LAIF. And so we put a solar system up there. I think our earnings were like almost nothing. It was like $10,000 or $11,000 a year in interest on $800,000. We put $800,000 into the system, and we're saving $45,000 a year in our electric bills.
Wow.
So we made an investment, but it's paying off big time. So just get a hold of them, fill up there, and they'll shoot you down the information on what we put, how much we paid, how it will work. It might save a little time.
The other thing is Harry from North Bay Watershed Association he's willing to come down and talk to us for about 10 to 15 minutes. Because we're now members.
Patrick, Peter, report?
I'm reporting that I have no report. LAFCO didn't meet this month, so I'm at a loss. And so are you.
Wow. All right, I think we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Well, report from you.